Dr. Gregg Steinberg, world-renowned sports psychologist, speaker, author, and TV personality, illustrates how the greatest athletes have mastered their game, then gives you hands-on tools so that you can master your world.
You have to practice being in the moment. What most of us do is we practice being distracted. And let me give you a perfect example. You go home and your wife or your husband starts talking to you. And you're thinking about what you're doing, what you had to do at the office, and what you got to do tomorrow and all that. And then your children or your child or your son or your daughter comes and he or she talks to you, and you're just thinking about what your wife just said. And then you're thinking about what you have to do in the office. And we're always practicing being distracted. And then what happens is, when we totally have to focus, we can't because we're practicing being distracted. So the key is, no matter what you're doing, if you're doing the dishes, if you are talking with your child, whatever it is, if you totally immerse yourself in the moment, then what happens is you're developing the skill of being in the moment. And so when you're working with that client, your mind doesn't wander. You are totally engaged in that moment.
I work with professional athletes on building mental toughness and emotional toughness. And what the audience might not know is that the stars have to master the physical game, the mental game, and the emotional game. These stars are facing intense pressure every week. They have to know what their body's going to do and then respond to that pressure. It appears that Susan's a perfectionist, but being a perfectionist breeds all this pressure. What great performers can do is turn pressure into pleasure. Warren uses that as a mental strategy. When we're joyful, it pushes all that pressure out. Confidence is king. If you don't have confidence, you're not going to be able to perform. You have to recall all the good stuff you've done and just keep on building upon that.
And one of my favorite stories is about Muhammad Ali. And long before he was boxing champion of the world, long before he strode up those stairs, shaking from Parkinson's to light the Olympic flame in Atlanta, he grew up very poor in Louisville. His mother could barely afford enough food, let alone toys like a bike. But Muhammad Ali saw this blue bike in the window, and he had to have the Schwinn. It had the nice bright handlebars and the seat, and he loved that blue bike, but he couldn't afford it. So all summer long, he worked at a grocery store boxing groceries. Excuse the pun. He finally had enough money to buy this blue bike. He gave the shopkeeper the money, rode all over Louisville, showing off to his friends and his family that Saturday, 8 hours. Came back home, next day parked his bike in front of the grocery store, made sure the lock was nice and tight, went to work, came out, someone stole his blue bike. He looked all over Louisville for his blue bike. He never found his blue bike, and he never found out who stole his blue bike. But we all know Muhammad Ali is a true champion. And what he did was he harnessed that negative energy into a positive. So every time he went in the ring, he'd point at his opponent and say, "You're the guy who stole my blue bike."
How much of it is physical for Michael Phelps, and how much is it mental?
Well, Heather, he's such a phenom, it's amazing. I mean, he's got great physical skills, but it's also his mental game that brings him to the top. And we don't appreciate the mental game because we only see the physical skills, but clearly Michael's mental game is head and shoulders above the rest. And I sat next to this person, and if you sit next to me, I'm going to pepper you with questions because I'm an author and I want to learn about you. And so I asked him, I said, "What do you do?" He says, I work for Merrill Lynch. And I said, "Well, I do a lot of seminars for Merrill Lynch." And I said, "Are you happy with your job?" And he had this great smile. And he said, "I am so happy with my job." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I just found out that I've been working with this client, and we just put his son through medical school, and now he just got hired at Vanderbilt, and he's studying, or I believe he's going to help with cancer research and maybe help cure cancer. And that makes me so happy that my job contributed to that. And I know your jobs have a lot of meaning. You have a lot of ripple effect where you're helping clients put their son or daughter through school. You're helping the community. You're helping people develop greater wealth, and they can in turn be happy. And sometimes we forget that. And sometimes we forget the meaning. But when we have meaning in our life, not only does it make us happier, it buffers the stress. My philosophy is this. We always hear this thing about mental toughness. It's really about emotional toughness. Your emotions control your performance. The good news is your thinking controls your emotions. And if you have the right thoughts, you're going to have the right emotions. And if you have the right emotions, you're going to play your best.
I don't know if you're familiar with Jack Nicklaus, but that's the pre-Tiger Woods. And there's a story where he's doing a seminar like this, and he says, I've never three-putted the last hole of a golf tournament. And I don't know if you're familiar with golf, but when you get on the green, you want a two-putt or one-putt. But three-putting's terrible for golfers. So he says, I've never three-putted the last hole of a tournament. This guy raised his hand and he says, Jack, I saw you last week on TV. You three-putted that last hole. And Jack Nicklaus says, I've never three-putted the last hole of a tournament. And the guy raised his hand and he goes, Jack, I saw you. I videotaped it. I'm going to send you the tape. And Jack Nicklaus says, I've never three-putted the last hole of a golf tournament. Because he's trained his brain never to bring that baggage. It's like, a ton of bricks. He's walking with that brick every time to the next hole. If he's remember, he three-putted the last hole of the tournament. And so you entice positive events with a positive brain, and you entice negative events with a negative brain. And one of my favorite stories is the little girl driving with her mother. And she says, Mommy, where are all the jerks and losers today? And their mother says, oh, they only come out when your dad's driving.